It's been fun watching Parker go through his project. He has been very good about reaching out to me and communicating and meeting deadlines and completing his work. And I know for a fact that he enjoyed his project and learned a lot, and I enjoyed following along on his journey of Italian cooking and reading his journals and insights about the restaurant industry, the food industry, and then also learning about some of the differences between Americanized Italian food and real Italian food, and what he liked and what he didn't like. So I think it was a really good process for Parker. I think he learned a lot, and unfortunately he never let me taste any of his food, but maybe now that the project is over, he always promised me cannoli and never brought me cannoli. So Parker, if you want the best grade on the senior project, I'm gonna need some cannoli. So I'm just putting that out there. It's not too late. But first we'll hear about his process. So Parker Lick.
Okay, so just to start this off, I know I promised a lot of people that there would be food here today. There is no food. Sorry, just off the bat, we're gonna go with that. So my name is Parker. I did my project on Italian cooking, and yeah, let's get into it. So to start a senior project, you have to choose a topic, and for me, it was between cooking and restoring the car I had. Right when we were deciding, at the end of last year, I had just bought this like old cool 280Z, and I really wanted to restore it, but there were pros and cons to that. So for me, this cool car, it would have been fun to do, but it was also going to be really expensive, so I decided that that probably wasn't the greatest thing for me to do. So that left cooking. That was my other option off the bat. And I've always loved to cook. When I was little, I used to cook in the kitchen with my dad and stepmom, and we'd make all kinds of things. I remember when I was really little, I put a whole bunch of random ingredients into a bowl, like stuff that does not go well together, and I threw it in the oven, and it came out in kind of like a bread shape. And so they wrote that down in some recipe somewhere in my house, but it was terrible, and they lied to me and they told me that it was good, but
it was good.
It
was good.
The cons for cooking though was it's like it would be a lot of time. I had a job at a restaurant. I was not cooking when I started the project, but I did have a job. I knew that if I wanted to start cooking, it would be a lot more hours and just a lot of physical work. And I had a technical advisor lined up in place. His name is Landon Saul. We'll talk about him a little bit later. Yeah. So the other thing you do when you start is you set a list of goals. So I was going to try to cook for the entire school. I was going to see if I could get into the kitchen downstairs at the cafe and make lunch one day. After talking it through with a bunch of people, we found out that because of like liability and insurance, I wasn't able to actually do that. So then my backup plan was to bring food to this, which you guys know that I did not do. So that one was a swing and a miss. Cook for my family, I did do that a fair amount. If I didn't cook at home, I would bring them food. So I succeeded on that one. Another one was to stay up to date with journals. I remember watching a bunch of senior projects last year, and everyone saying that it's the most important thing you can do is to stay up to date on your journals. So I did that for the most part, and then kind of near the end fell off, but you know, we're there now, so it's all good. The other thing I wanted to do when I started this project was to cook a new dish every month, and I picked out a list of 8 or 9 dishes that I really wanted to make, and I did that for the first couple months. Then it got really boring eating the same thing over and over again, so I was going to cook it like once or twice every weekend for the entire month, so I could really get good at each specific dish, but I decided that that wasn't the way I wanted to do my project. So what actually happened, I cooked a lot of food. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. Every day that I worked, I probably fed 100 or 200 people, and I fed family and friends. So I cooked a lot of Italian food, and I also cooked a lot of dishes that I had never even heard of before, and just learned a lot about kind of what it's like to be in a kitchen and what it's like to cook Italian food. So the place I did all of my cooking was Vivace. I'm sure a lot of you guys know that I worked there, so I don't stop talking about it. But So it's been around since 1995. It's owned by my technical advisor, Landon, and his co-owner, Jeff, who's the front of house manager. And, you know, they're a classic Italian restaurant. They're definitely Americanized Italian food, which we'll get into a little bit later. But, you know, they make great food. I love working there. They're definitely a staple in the Charlottesville community. So this is Landon, and that's me. He grew up in Charlottesville. His parents owned a butcher shop, so he was always around food from a young age. And he went to Johnson & Wales actually for a semester, decided that he didn't like it because it was just a whole bunch of watching people cook food. You didn't like really get your hands in on the food at Johnson & Wales specifically. So he went to Italy and he studied at the Italian Culinary Institute. And so I think that kind of validates him to be my advisor. He's typical or classic Italian chef. He also loves Travis Scott. He periodically throughout he just on multiple occasions has sent me Travis Scott songs that he was been listening to recently. So that's kind of his thing. Another big part of the project was research, and I went to Landon and asked him, like, what do I research? He told me that I should study like 5 different regions in Italy, the 5 prominent ones. And so I learned about how each region has their own kind of like specialty, and if one region is like primarily based on like a coast, it's gonna have a lot more seafood in it, or if it's like if there's more cows in one, there's gonna be heavier sauces and more like meat in the actual like food. But each region kind of has its own classic like style of Italian food, which I thought was really interesting. I didn't like make the leap until I actually researched it that like different places within the same country have different styles of food. The other thing that I researched was how Americans created their own like form of Italian food. It's a lot more cheese, a lot more garlic, like salt, and that's what you get if you go to a lot of Italian restaurants in the United States. So when I started at Vivace, I was a food runner and expediter. I didn't cook at all. I was just kind of like making sure food got out of the kitchen, make sure it went to the right place. So then I came to Landon with this project that I was doing for school, and he moved me, and he helped me kind of get my start in the kitchen. And so I started with salads, and I was trained by this lady, Olga, who didn't speak a lot of English, and I don't speak a lot of Spanish. So there's definitely a language barrier, but she was able to train me. So I made a bunch of different salads. There's pictures of them on the next slide, but for me, the salads, it didn't really feel like cooking. It was more like assembling food. Like you put all these ingredients like on top of each other and then like serve it. It's not like, you know, like you're not changing the chemistry of the food at all. Same way you do when you heat something up. So these are pictures of all the salads I made. I know the one on the bottom right isn't really a salad, but it's comes from the same spot in the kitchen. The top left is a spinach salad. It's got golden red beets, goat cheese, walnuts, and it's served with a balsamic glaze. There's a caprese down there, which is the tomatoes and mozzarella, which is a very classic Italian dish. Above that is a wedge salad, which is also a classic Italian dish. It's served with pancetta and blue cheese dressing. And yeah, bottom right is caviar and smoked salmon, which is a little bit fancier than Vivace usually does, but I think it looked pretty, so I took a picture of it. So then I started cooking like on the line, and it's a lot more, I'm not gonna say dangerous, but it's definitely a lot more intense back there. You're standing in front of like for me, actually I'm just gonna tell a story about my first cooking shift. That did not happen on my first cooking shift, but so I remember I was really nervous about it the night before, and I didn't get a lot of sleep, and so my normal shift is 4:30 to like 9:30, and so it's like 5 hours. It's not that bad, but cooking is like 1 in the afternoon to like 10:30 at night, so it's a lot longer. And so I remember I get there, and I'm tired already, like stepping in the door because I didn't sleep well the night before, and I go through all the prep because that's what you got to do that before you like I start actually cooking for customers. So I prep for 2 or 3 hours, and then service starts, and I'm tired, and I'm in the like very corner of the kitchen next to this 500-degree oven making pizzas and doing all this like just hard work. I burned my hands a whole bunch because you're reaching in and out of the oven, and I got like beat up that night, and I walked out of work and I almost stopped cooking. That was it. At that moment I never wanted to step foot in a kitchen again. But I made myself go back, and the next weekend when I did another 9-hour cooking shift, I was a little more experienced, so I was able to do it. And then the next weekend when I went again, I was able to do it. But I wasn't able to really work 5 days a week like I was at that point, so I only did that for about a month and a half, and then I stopped. And then, so there's a lot of like injuries that happen. I'm sure Carlos knows, he works in a kitchen too, we talk about this a lot. But like a whole bunch of burns, your hands are pretty much like always have some sort of like scratch or burn on them. And that's definitely the worst like cut I've had. I remember I came to Tandem after work because we were setting up for the Christmas winter holiday thing, and I had a glove on because when you get hurt in the kitchen you don't really stop, you just like prevent it from getting in food and then continue. So I cut the like chunk of my thumb off, put a glove on my hand, and then duct taped the bottom of the glove. And so when I got here, the glove had like filled up with blood from my finger, and there's a video out there somewhere of me taking the glove off, and my entire like hand is like covered. But I got here and they like patched me up, and that's the end of it. It healed back, but you can still kind of see where it was missing. So yeah, that's definitely the worst injury, but it happens, and you just keep moving forward. So these are all things that I cooked while on the line. On the left is calamari and pepper served with smoked paprika aioli on top. Then there's eggplant parmesan, chicken parmesan. Those look a little messier because we were busy, and I needed the picture for the project. So they look better at other times in the menu, or during service. And then on the right is sausage with peppernata and polenta. That's another staple of the hibachi menu. All of these dishes sell all the time, so I've probably made 500 chicken parms in my time with hibachi. So. And then pizza. Pizza was the first thing I actually learned how to make in the kitchen because I really wanted one every night. So finally they were like, "We're done making them for you. You have to go make them." So the difficult thing about pizza isn't actually like putting all the toppings and stuff on. It's stretching it, like first making the dough, which I've never done before. That's always there when I get there, and then stretching it out. It requires a whole bunch of like technique with your hands, and it takes a while to really not perfect, but get used to how to do it. So yeah, these are all pizzas I made. Most of these are on the menu. The one with the clams on it is not. That was special for like a week, and I think we sold one of them, and so we took it off the menu. So now this is when I was trying to do like the same dish multiple times a month. So these are all chicken piccata, which is lemon, butter, white wine, and caper, and it's served over starch. And for me, I cooked it a bunch of times and then didn't want to eat it anymore, or got really bored of just cooking the same thing. So I did that, and then the next slide is penne risotto, and that's basically like vodka sauce without vodka. And I got tired of cooking the like same thing over and over again. So I decided at this point, this is also when I started to like lose motivation to like keep doing the senior project. So I decided that I was just gonna cook whatever I wanted to and make it somehow like tie into Italian cooking. So there's a bunch of like sandwiches and whatnot I've made. I haven't taken pictures of those because I usually eat them pretty fast after I make them. But there's a bunch of like off the menu things that are made with Italian ingredients, I guess. But I think cooking the same thing over and over again is a good way to get good at something, but it's not a great way to get good at being a cook. You're just getting good at like following someone else's instructions. So the next slide is what I learned in the project. The main thing for me was how to work in a commercial kitchen, because a lot of people know what it's like to cook because they cook at home, but you step into a kitchen that feeds 400 people a night, and it's completely different atmosphere, completely different like way to do things. So I had cooked at home for most of my life, and then I get to working in restaurants, and it was a complete like 180-degree switch for me. So that was probably the main thing I learned. And then like some advice I have is to choose a topic that you're like really interested in. I'm glad I did cooking, so I was able to like stick with it and really like become passionate about it. I'm glad that I also didn't stick to my original idea for what I wanted the project to be, where I'd cook the same dish multiple times and then consider myself good at it and switch to another one, because I was more passionate just about making food that I wanted to make. Sticking to a schedule, that's where the job aspect of this really helped, because I had to be there every like 4 days a week. So I was spending a lot of time on my senior project. It gave me a lot of things to write about in my journals, and I learned a whole bunch, a lot more than if I was like to just go out in my yard or my driveway and work on a car every now and then. More advice. This is kind of like advice and what I learned. This is placed weirdly, but don't fall behind on any of your work. I know people who they didn't really turn their synopsis for a while, and then they kind of more work popped up in school, and they just got behind. If you stick to the schedule, then you can, the project isn't all that difficult. I learned knife skills. I thought I had good knife skills going into the kitchen, but I very quickly learned that I was doing completely wrong, and so I completely like retrained my body how to like use a knife in the correct way. Finding a good technical advisor. I got lucky, and I already had one in place, but definitely because they'll keep you on track too, and just making sure you do your work and learning all you can is my best advice for the project. Yeah, so that was what I did. That was my project.